Hello, Falsha Shock. Welcome to episode 6 of the Short Grass, the Kildare Nationalist Sports Podcast, where we do our best to cover all things sport in Kildare with particular emphasis on the Kildare Football and Hurling Championships. I'm Pat Costello, and with me as usual are Ger McNally, Richard Commins and Tommy O'Connell. Lads, we had a dramatic championship weekend last weekend, and none more so than the hurling quarter-final, which happened on Wednesday evening in Mangard Park between Coildove and Selbridge. A late win there for Coildove, but Richard, it was a dramatic one because it didn't look like it was going to be a Coildove win at half-time.
No, they didn't. Great game. Yeah, Selbridge were ahead, I think, by 9 at half-time. They'd stretched that out to 10 early in the second half. But, you know, this is Coildove. They're nothing if not dogged, and there was always a sting in the tail from them, I thought. Whether they'd come back to win it now, I mean, it was one of the great comebacks of recent times, I think. And, you know, credit to the some of the older players, but also some of the newer guys as well. But I thought in particular Mark Delaney, who took over the free taking in the second half, or maybe just close to half time, but he scored, I think, 6 from play. As well as that, a lot of them from good range. And between him and Johnny Byrne, who was, you know, brilliant all through, Declan Flaherty, I mean, we'll see on the team of the week. They have plenty of players in there, you know. But you know, they really, Selbridge will be kicking themselves because, you know, they really had it. You know, they had it under control early in the second half, and they had some good performances as well in the first half. I mean, they really tied up the Coildove attack in that first half. I thought Neil Monaghan was brilliant sweeping. Michael Owens was great coming forward. Jerry Keegan obviously in attack, and James Dolan, who created, I think, 3 of the goals. So, you know, Selbridge were really going well, but, you know, there's Coildove for you. They came back with those goals in the second half from some of their key experienced players. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I mean, there was no randomness to it. You know, I think I counted something like 42 shots from Coildove versus, I think, about 34 for Selbridge. So, you know, they did deserve it at the end of the day, but, you know, really dramatic comeback, and, you know, that's Coildove all over, I think.
Did Selbridge lose the composure a bit because the 2 men sent off at a crucial stage, obviously, towards the end of the game when they were still in control?
Yeah, and, you know, I'd maybe question a couple of the substitutions as well. I mean, Selbridge have 2 nippy little corner forwards, Andrew McNiff and obviously James Dolan from the Kildare panel. And while, you know, they were in one hell of a battle with Conor Gordon and Dylan Brereton marking them, but they were generally on top of those particular duels in the first half, and maybe Coildove got a little bit on top of them in the second half. But I thought Selbridge brought them off. They were maybe a couple of points ahead, and they brought James Dolan off in particular, and he'd created 3 of the goals in the first half. So I was a bit surprised that they took him off, unless it was an injury or something. And yes, you know, the composure went a little bit at the end, but, you know, that can happen when you've got a tidal wave coming towards you, I suppose.
And the wind was significant, particularly in the second half, I thought.
I'm trying to remember back. It seems so long ago now.
It was coming from left to right, into the corner. It was a difficult one.
Was in favour of Coildove in the second half there.
So Selbridge have to be
really great win, but a great advert for Kildare Hurling as well.
Absolutely.
You know, after we'd said it on here the previous week, I think the preliminary the last round of group games all went, you know, very one-sided. So it was great to see such a competitive game.
Yeah, and Ger, the semi-finals the weekend after next, 27th, Saturday 27th, will be Coildove versus Naas, Aero Curracoil versus Maynooth. Is that what we might have expected, Ger?
Yeah, that was what we would have expected. Yeah, kind of maybe there's other sides that would have perhaps thought they had an opportunity. Certainly Selbridge obviously would have at half-time last week thought they were going to be in the semi-finals. So, yeah, I suppose certainly Naas, obviously, Maynooth, certainly they've been one of the progressive sides over the last couple of years, and Aero back at senior level have really held their own and have been outside of that Naas game this year, have been very good this year. So, yeah, we've got 4 good sides left there. Obviously, it's a huge task now for Coildove. And we spoke to Johnny Byrne after that Selbridge game, and yeah, he said we'd love to get one over on them, but he kind of recognised that I think his exact words were, Naas are an outfit and a half, and that's probably says it all, really. Naas have been absolutely the standard bearers and seem to be so far ahead of the rest. It's going to take something monumental from Kyle Dove and probably an off day for Naas to see an upset there. But the other semi-final is going to be very close as well. I think that could be a real cracking game. Errol Kirkwill, as I said, saw them a couple of times in the early stages of this championship and was very impressed with them. And Maynooth, supposed to be bolstered in the last couple of weeks. McCabe came back, I think, for the last game. David Poulter, was he struggling with an injury as well? So yeah, I suppose it'll depend on the fitness of some of their county players and what sort of a team they can field. But I'd expect that game to be very, very close indeed. Yeah,
and Tommy, do you think that match against Selbridge will bring on Kyle Dove quite a bit, because Naas haven't played for a while and the matches they've played are they've been very much on top. So that match against Selbridge could be a good one for Kyle Dove.
Yeah, it could, and you could hear from the manager's comments afterwards as well. They have that togetherness, and you hear a lot of people talking this year about the focus that Kyle Dove had on the championship. Again, they didn't have any players from the squad this year on the county panel. And then obviously you have lads that are dual players as well, but by all accounts, there was huge focus on it this year. A huge end to the game for them, and a great win. That big loss to Maynooth in the last round of the group campaign was probably a little bit startling as well. So they have to pick up from where they left off the last day. If they drop the standard from that second half at all, things could get very difficult for them.
So those semi-finals are on next weekend. Sorry, the weekend after next. So we'll have a good look at that on our podcast number 7. Richard, Clane and Leixlip in the Beef Hurling Championship final. Not unexpected, I would say.
Well, I suppose Naas have tended to get to that final in the last couple of years. So I think, and no disrespect to Naas, I think it's actually good from a competitive point of view that we've got Leixlip and Clane in that final. Two teams that, making it effectively, for people who don't know, obviously that would be a Naas B team, and if they win out, they can't win promotion. So I think having two teams who are truly going for promotion in the final should make it a brilliant affair. Leixlip have been very impressive all through that league, obviously unbeaten. You can see it there on the table. But Clane, I think getting over Naas will give them a lot of confidence and going into that one as well. I think that one is nip and tuck, and struggle to call it. I think from the very little I've seen of the two teams, but just looking at the form and the players each of them has, it'll be a great final.
Yeah, and Ger, should be a good final between Maynooth and Naas in the Intermediate Hurling Championship as well.
Yeah, just before we move on to that, just on the Senior B, just to touch on Broadford as well, because I'm championing all the kind of, maybe with respect to smaller clubs. I spoke with some of the football clubs last week at junior level, but it's great to see Broadford up competing at Senior B level. And although 12 points is a bit of a heavy defeat, I think it's about half the scoring difference of what it had been when the two sides met earlier in the group stages. So good to see them being competitive. And I think Tommy pointed it out that they probably have more dual players maybe than any other team in the county as well. They have a lot of lads, whether it's Clogherink or Johnstone Bridge, and maybe in Carberry as well, a couple of other guys as well. So yeah, it's great to see them just competitive, and just to give them a mention too.
Yeah, and well, that Intermediate Hurling Championship, Ger, that's on Sunday week as well. That's Maynooth versus Naas, and then of course we have the UPMC Junior Hurling Championship final on the Friday night. Kappa versus Leixlip in Cedars in Connells Park, and the Junior A Hurling Championship, UPMC Junior A Hurling Championship, the Larrys versus Naas. That's also on the Friday night. That's in Mangard 1. So those will be all interesting games, and we hope that there will be big crowds, and I'm sure they'll be covered on Clubber, and obviously they will be covered by the Kildare Nationalist as well, and there'll be coverage, I'm sure, on KFM. So that's our quick look at hurling. We will have more emphasis on hurling next weekend because it's a final week. So in episode 7 of the Short Grass, you will have the hurling. Lads, football week. Oh, we want the hurling. Oh, yes. Let's go with the, thanks, Tommy, for nudging me there. The Senior Hurling Championship Team of the Week. Ger, you might announce that one there in association with our sponsor.
Yes, absolutely. And thanks as always to Darren and the team there at Loading and Lifting for their sponsorship of our teams of the week. I should say before we mention this, there's obviously a lot of red at Kyle Dove, and there was a serious discussion about maybe Selbridge, that things could have looked very different after about 45 minutes of that match, and maybe Selbridge would have had much more representation. But I suppose to the victors go the spoils, as we said, and the experienced cohort of the Kyle Dove team to turn that game around has obviously got a huge credence in the picking of this team. But to run through it then, Keith O'Callaghan of Leixlip is in goal. I'm also sorry to mention as well that this is a mixture as well of the Senior B, which we haven't done in other weeks, but obviously with only one game with the Senior Championship, we included some of the Senior B teams as well, and some of the players as well, took that into account. So one of those players, Keith O'Callaghan of Leixlip, is in goal. Jack O'Brien of Selbridge is in the full-back line, along with Dylan Brereton and Conor Gordon of Kyle Dove. John Day of Kyle Dove, Mark Brace of Kyle Dove, and Michael Olmsted of Selbridge completing the half-back line. James Canning of Leixlip and Mark Delaney of Kyle Dove are in midfield, with Aina O'Neill of Kyle Dove and Declan Flaherty also of Kyle Dove, either side of the county goalkeeper, Paddy McKenna, who of course plays outfield for Clane. And then in the full forward line, one of those dual players that I mentioned for Broadford, he was in action for Johnstone Bridge and scoring action for Johnstone Bridge in the football side of things as well this week. Joshua Donoghue named the corner forward there, and Johnny Bourne of Kyle Dove and Cian Shanahan of Clane complete that lineup.
Yeah, a very interesting lineup, and as you say, there are a lot of experience there in that with the Kyle Dove players in particular, and I suppose Selbridge will feel hard done by, but those are the way it goes, and that there were a number of, including midfielders for Selbridge, who could have got in there as well.
Yeah, just two quickly, Tommy, sorry, just jump in there. Sorry, just two very quickly points on it. Just one, Dylan Brereton, I thought he could have been taken off in the first half in the game against Selbridge. He was being absolutely roasted by James Dolan in particular, I thought. But I think it just shows that a game is a full hour, because Dylan Brereton really turned that around, and the backline of Kyle Dove, as Richard kind of touched on, really got on top of the Selbridge attack in the second half. And again, going back to Johnny Bourne, he said that the backs led from the front, and it was really the likes of Dylan Brereton who were able to get on top of that, help turn that game in their favour. And then the other thing, maybe just a question for the other lads, is there's a lot of those experienced Kyle Dove lads. Is there another year for them at inter-county level? Obviously, kind of getting on a little bit. Some of them, they have their own personal circumstances that maybe would mean that they couldn't give the commitment. But just looking at some of them playing last week, then I think they'd be a big addition if there was some way to get them into the Kildare panel with so many big games coming up next year.
Well, they have the experience to pull it out of the fire, and when things are difficult, and I'm sure things will be difficult at county level next year. I think, Richard, you wanted to get in there, did you?
It was just a quick one that I can pick 3, possibly 4 players here that have been on the football team of the week as well. Yeah. I think Joshua Donoghue was in for Johnstone Bridge. Cian Shanahan made the team of the week for Clane as a wing back. And either Conor Gordon or Dylan Brereton, or both. One of them, I think, it could be both, have been on the team of the week for St. Kevin's. So I just, again, there's people kind of wouldn't realise that there's crossovers there, but it might be worth a separate conversation to have a look at these dual players, maybe a team of the year dual players or something. But it is really interesting. Like, a lot of people might not have been aware that Joshua Donoghue is a fine hurler, because he'd be so well known for football. So yeah, just a little piece on that.
I'm going to throw this out now because it came in from one of our listeners or viewers. Should there be a split season, and we won't talk about it now, but maybe at the end of the podcast, should there be a split season between hurling and football like they do down in Wexford? We'll throw that out now. You can be thinking about it, but that came in from one of our listeners and viewers. All right, hurling finished. Let's go quickly to the Senior Football Championship, the Joe Malamotor Senior Football Championship preliminary quarterfinals last weekend. Wins for Johnstone Bridge, Moorfield, and who else won there? No, they were the only two. Sorry. So this weekend, or the next up this weekend, it's Sarsfields versus Johnstone Bridge on Sunday in Cedarville St. Conleth's Park at 2:45. Selbridge versus Moorfield. Also on Sunday in Cedarville St. Conleth's Park at 1 p.m. All peculiar times. Cara versus the Thigh. People are really looking forward to that one on Saturday at 5:15 at Cedarville St. Conleth's Park, and then Clane versus Naas, repeat of the county final of what is 2 years ago. That's on Saturday, also in Cedarville St. Conleth's Park, 7 p.m. Ger, Johnstone Bridge going through against Easttown, and now they play Sarsfields.
Yeah, absolutely. Weird sort of a game. It was kind of meandering all the way through Johnstone Bridge without ever kind of being kind of in top gear. It felt were still well on top, and they scored 1-4 before Easttown got a score. Sam Doran going off early certainly didn't help them. I thought he was a big loss for them as the game developed, and Ger McNally also went off at half-time then as well. So those two are starting forwards. But Johnston Bridge, they only scored 2 points in the second half then, and both of them from frees. And at one stage, kind of briefly, midway through the half, Easttown, who had been pretty lackluster, and Emmett Bolton was doing everything he could to rouse them. He made a triple change at half-time and another double change then kind of just around the midway point of the second half as well. And yeah, they burst into life all of a sudden. They got a point from oh God, who was it? It was Oncanef. Of course, it was has been fabulous for them all season. Oncanef, and then they got two 2-pointers in a row. And Niall Cummins with his second free from outside the arc of the game, and then a wonderful point by Keane Boran. And all of a sudden, with about 12 or 13 minutes to go, it was back to 3 points, and Easttown with a bit of momentum behind them. Kind of thoughts were drifting back to the game that had been on the previous night when Moorfield staged a stunning comeback, and could Easttown do something similar? But in the end, they couldn't kick on past that. Kind of Johnstone Bridge wrestled back control, and it was only the 1 point scored in the final, including injury time, probably 15 minutes of play as well. So it was a Paul Cribben free that saw Johnstone Bridge over the line with a 4-point win, but not a hugely impressive win by Johnstone Bridge. It'll have to be an awful lot better, I think, going up against Sarsfields if they're going to trouble them, and they certainly can be. They got a nicely worked goal when it was played into Dean Kelly, who batted it down for Daniel Flynn, but it was kind of flashes of that attacking play. It wasn't really consistent over the full hour, and as I said, Sam Doran was a big loss, and they'll definitely be doing everything in their power to get him fit for Sunday's game.
Will Sarsfields be on a high after that victory over Naas 2 weeks ago now, really?
Look, they know themselves that at the end of the day it was only a group game, and a pretty much of a dead rubber group game, that they won't be getting too carried away. They have a very experienced manager there in Vinnie Walsh, and obviously a club that is steeped in the history of winning club championships. So no, they won't be getting carried away with that win over Naas, albeit that it was a good win. They will have been back down to business, I'm sure, on the Tuesday after that, and quickly focusing on whoever came through, and now obviously for the last week all eyes on Johnstone Bridge. So no, I wouldn't expect Sarsfields to be getting carried away with that nice victory at all. I'm sure they will be having kind of been hammered home to them. That's the kind of level that they need to hit now for the remainder of the championship. They've, from a Sarsfields point of view, they'll hope they'll have 3 more games at least, and they'll need to hit that kind of level of performance in every one of those games, and probably more again. So yeah, no, I can't imagine any sort of complacency will be an issue with Sarsfields.
Richard, you said Kyle Dove were Kyle Dove. Moorfield were Moorfield, obviously, in the victory over Maynooth, and now they play Selbridge in the quarter-final.
Yeah, and I hinted last week maybe that Moorfield would have been happier to get to a quarter-final against Selbridge than either Sarsfields or Naas, and that's how it's turned out.
You conspirator.
They certainly left it late to prove my theory. What was that at the weekend against Maynooth? I think Maynooth will be absolutely kicking themselves. I mean, they had an awful lot of possession. They controlled an awful lot of the game, but just seemed very reluctant almost to pull the trigger when they got towards the goal. And, Moorfield are Moorfield. What can you say about them at this stage? But just to pick out a few things, I think Evan O'Brien was superb. He'd had a difficult enough game. He'd missed a good goal chance in the first half. He was being well marked. I think it was Cathal Moore was marking him, if I'm not mistaken. But
Quinn is it
Carl Quinn, sorry, yeah. He was doing a great job on him in the first half, and he did miss that goal chance as well. But one thing about Evan O'Brien you'd think of is his pace and, obviously his scoring, but he came out around the middle for a couple of those last kickouts and caught. He got one breaking ball. He caught one out of the air as well. He was superb, and it was just one-way traffic in those last 4 or 5 minutes, and just a brilliant finish, and so Moorfield, like just unreal. And I don't think they'll fear Selbridge at all. I think Selbridge have been up and down. They've only really produced one excellent performance, the one against the tie. Maybe they're building up towards the quarterfinals, but I don't think Moorfield will fear them. I think Selbridge will be slight favourites, obviously, but I think that's going to be a great game. That's really the one I'm really looking forward to at the weekend.
Yeah, well, that county final of a few years ago, when was it 13-man Moorfield had the victory over Selbridge? Will that be in the psyche, or will players have forgotten about that at this stage?
I think a lot of, certainly on the Selbridge side, a lot of the players may have moved on from that team, but I think it's always in the psyche, and psyche is a big thing for Selbridge at this point. Having lost 2 county finals as well, and it's a huge thing for Moorfield. I mean, it's their DNA to battle and come back. When things are going against them. So psyche is going to be a huge part of this game. I would have thought.
Whoever he or she is, Tommy.
Yeah.
Are Cara the team of the championship? Remember, Raheen's were the team of the championship a few years ago, but Cara out of the intermediate grade, and here they are in a quarter-final against Athy, who obviously are one of the favourites.
Yeah, it's a real novel pairing, isn't it? I mean, if you think about it, going back over the last couple of years, if you look into the future and you have a crystal ball and you see the likes of Cara against Athy in a quarter-final, and then Cara being so impressive. Like the last couple of years, obviously with intermediate champions that come up, might struggle a little bit, and in fairness, have struggled a little bit. Like Allenwood got that one win last year that did the job for them before they went out of the winners group. But Cara this year have been brilliant, and then going by like they're in the losers group, and that's they just about lost out to Raheen's in that preliminary round, but you could see how impressive they were that day, and maybe the losers group. People, that's the debate that goes on. And before every single championship, I constantly have people saying to me, sure, wouldn't they be better off losing? Sure, if you go into the losers group, you could get a bit of momentum and, you could finish top first or second, then get into the knockouts. Whereas if you go into the winners group, you're playing against your Naas, your Selbridge and the Athy, and you nearly always laugh it off to think you can't think like that. No team is going to go out thinking like that. It's the same conversation that when people say about, the Sarsfield's Naas game or the Clane Moorfield game the last day. It doesn't really mean that much. So will they be up for it? Will the teams be up for it? I just think it helped Cara so much being in that losers group to get that little bit of momentum. And they're really going in. I mean, they were in Division 3 this year. And Athy were in Division 1. And Athy are going to have to seriously do their homework on them. We know most of their players, the county players that we would know of, the Ryan Burke and Dara Swords, but they have so many other good young players there, McKennedy and Ronan Dury. We can see how good Dan Lynham is this year with his huge scoring from midfield, whereas a lot of people would have known a couple of years ago all about Dan because he was midfield for Kildare under-20s. And then he did a little bit of travel, and then he was injured last year, so he had a bit of a broken year. When you think about that, they were able to, he came back into the team obviously later on the championship and in their Leinster campaign. But it's even when I was doing the graphic, your Sarsfields, and then you're just looking at Jesus Christ, Cara versus Athy, and then you think about it and how exciting Cara are. And this year, the Athy game, whereas Athy had this big running game this year, and it's all about pace and youth. Mixed in with some really good experienced players, and that could be an absolute cracker of a game. I know it's easy to say that Athy, there's a good chance Athy will absolutely wipe the floor with them. I don't see too many teams wiping the floor with this Cara team over the last couple of years. I know they were in the intermediate last year, but intermediate's an extremely difficult championship to win. It's nearly always a bolter every year that wins it. So there's so much, and there's so many different things. Like Athy proved the last day, that they are still there as contenders. So many people were let down by them in that Selbridge game because people like myself probably had them up as number 2. And I didn't know what was coming as regards Selbridge giving Athy a trimming, or Sarsfields beating Naas and Sarsfields being so impressive. But suddenly Athy went down to probably 4 on the list. But then they put in that brilliant performance the last day against Johnstown Bridge. So you don't know. You just don't know what Athy team come up. If the Athy team that we know turn up with the quality that they have. Now, Young Moran is going to be, the likes of, who's going to pick him up?
I presume it would be Ryan Burke.
You would imagine Ryan Burke, because Ryan Burke is similar to the likes of Harry O'Neill for Clane, where even when Harry was very young, he always demanded to mark the best player on the field, no matter what the position was. So we saw the way Ryan Burke is this year with his mark. We saw it the last day, was it against Carbery? Getting in lads' faces, even lads that he knows, and putting it up to them. So that could be a right battle. Those individual matchups are going to be very interesting. A great game to go to.
Absolutely. And another one, Ger, the repeat of the county final of it was 2 years ago, Clane and Naas. And Naas no longer unbeaten. And Clane with a very good, impressive victory last time out.
Yeah, Pat, you were asking there how Sarsfields will react after that game against Naas. So I think the real interesting one is how Naas come out of that game now. They would have had a long kind of couple of weeks there in the bunker there under Philly McMahon. And the question is, was that just a blip? Was it going through the motions of it? It didn't really mean a huge amount to them. And is that the start of a bit of a slide? We'll get the answer in the affirmative now, because Clane are a side who will be absolutely gunning for them. You mentioned that county final years ago. I think they played a semi-final since then that was even more kind of representative of the kind of closeness between the two of them, because I think that day Clane out in Mangard Park were destined to beat a Naas side in a semi-final who weren't firing on all colours, on all cylinders, until they brought Derek Kerwin off the bench, who I don't think had kicked the ball that year after the inter-county season. He was really struggling with injury through that summer, but he came off the bench to rescue Naas that day and scored a goal and a couple of points, I think, in the second half. So Clane will be gunning for them. And Clane, our side, I think, have probably improved with every game this year, and certainly produced their best against Moorfield last time out when it really counted in terms of getting into the quarterfinals. So, yeah, this is another one that's going to be a really intriguing game to watch. Shane O'Sullivan was fantastic the last day by all accounts, and somebody who maybe hasn't been firing in the Clane forward line, but now he's back to form. Adam Fanning as well, and they're players who we know on their day can cause problems for any defence. And of course, Brian McLaughlin has been probably the most consistent performer in that forward line. But now if he gets a bit of a dig out with O'Sullivan and Fanning as well, and they're distracting defenders, all of a sudden there's more room for them. And Naas, as bad as they were up front against Sarsfields, they only scored 1-7. They were very loose in the back line right from the very off. Sarsfields were finding it so easy just to find pockets of space in around the scoring zone inside the Naas final third there. So that's something that they're going to have to tighten up on, definitely. And yeah, it would have been interesting to be a fly in the wall in the Naas setup over the last couple of weeks. I'm sure on one hand they won't be panicking because, as I said, it was a game that didn't really mean a huge amount to them. And some way maybe that unbeaten run being off their back, that can be a little bit of a burden off their shoulders as well. But at the same time now, what sort of response that they got, it's going to be very, very interesting to see. On one hand, I wouldn't be surprised if Naas come out and won this game by 10 or 15 points and absolutely blew Clane away. But on the other hand as well, I wouldn't be surprised if it was going right down to the wire and right there in the last kick of the ball.
And don't forget, it's extra time and penalties for this from now on. I'm going to ask each of you, just in one word, for a winner in each of the four quarterfinal, or each of the 4 games. 4 games. Yeah, sorry, get my numbers mixed up again. So, Richard, Sarsfields versus Johnstown Bridge, winner.
Sarsfields.
Selbridge versus Moorfield. 7 seconds.
Draw.
Draw, yeah. Yeah, well, yeah.
Selbridge.
Yeah. Go to extra time.
After extra time, possibly.
After extra time, yeah. Okay. Cara versus Athy.
Athy.
And Clane versus Naas. Are we another
Naas.
extra time? Naas.
Naas.
Okay.
No,
Tommy?
not extra time. I think they'll win comfortable enough.
Okay. Tommy, Sarsfields versus Johnstown Bridge. Your winner?
Sarsfields.
Selbridge versus Moorfield. Are we extra time on this one?
No, Moorfield win it in regular time.
Okay. Cara versus Athy. No comment.
Athy. I think that'll be high scoring.
Okay.
Sorry, Athy.
Okay.
One word.
Athy. And the final one, Clane versus Naas.
Naas.
Yes, okay. And now we'll ask the real expert, Chair.
You've asked the experts.
Sarsfields versus Johnstown Bridge.
Yeah, 3 out of 3 for Sarsfields, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Selbridge versus Moorfield.
Yeah, like the other lads, this was probably the one that I'm kind of stuck on. I could definitely see Moorfield making this a really tricky game for Selbridge, but I think Selbridge probably at this stage just have a little bit too much for Moorfield, so I'll go with Selbridge.
After extra time?
Oh, yeah, could be maybe only a point or two in it. Yeah, we're down to the last again, injury time. Actually,
Cara
no,
versus...
if it does come down to injury time, again, Moorfield, if it is close, Moorfield are probably more likely to grind those ones out. So Selbridge would probably, there needs to be maybe 4 or 5 points ahead going into the final 5 minutes. They're going to see that one out. So yeah, that's going to be an interesting one, definitely.
Cara versus Athy.
Yeah, I think without being disrespectful to Cara, who've been absolutely brilliant to watch this year, this one probably a little bit more straightforward, yeah, Athy.
And Clane versus Naas.
Yeah, and I think Naas will bounce back to form there as well. Yeah, and see off Clane. But of course, the Paul Kelly factor there as well. That's another one. I suppose an intriguing one. Paul Kelly has spent time with Naas as manager, and of course leading Clane now, a good manager. Yeah, so that's another interesting subplot to that game. But yeah, no,
will that motivate Clane though or Naas? I think that'll motivate Naas a little bit.
Possibly, yeah. But look, as I said, he seems to get a bit of a tune out of Clane now as they progress through the championship. So yeah.
Well, we look forward to all of those games in the Joe Malin Motors Senior Football Championship quarter-final. Sarsfields versus Johnstown Bridge on Sunday in Cedar St. Conleth's Park at 2:45. Selbridge versus Moorfield on Sunday in St. Conleth's at 1 o'clock. And then on a Saturday in Cedar St. Conleth's Park, Carroll versus Athy at 5:15 and Clane versus Naas at 7 p.m. Okay, and don't forget there's also a very important match as well. That's the relegation final between Alan Wood and Confey. And Ger, Alan Wood, there again, difficult year for them. Confey have been there and thereabouts for the last number of years, but always seem to prevail.
Yeah, it's a horrible game to be in. Neither side obviously wants to be there, but once you're in that final, I've seen a few of them down the years. They're absolute dogfights. Alan Woods, I think they've lost every game this year, isn't it? 11 league games and then four in the championship as well. So like that's a long losing streak. But I think my mind drifts back. I think Eidstown were on a similar losing streak one year in the intermediate level, and we're on the way to junior in the relegation final, but managed to pick up the one win they needed. So it's certainly not beyond the realms of possibility that Alan Wood could turn it around and get the win here. But Confey are just so unlucky to be here. I think it's just the harshness of the draw sometimes that that they're close in the opening round, the preliminary round. There are 3 group games that were very competitive, and the fact that Alan Wood and Kyle Cock were in the opposite losing group probably meant that someone out of that group D was always going to fall in. That'll be a little bit unfortunate to be there, and I think Confey would probably consider themselves to be that unfortunate to be there. But at the same time, they are there, and if they don't approach it in the right manner, or if they're feeling sorry for themselves and thinking they should be somewhere else, well, then Alan Wood will be only too happy to take to capitalise on it. Alan Wood, as we mentioned, they've got some of those Kyle Dove hurlers, and they have that same spirit of those Kyle Dove hurlers, and they'll relish this kind of dogfight as well. So yeah, I've kind of expected Alan Wood to get maybe a win or two through the championship and get themselves out of trouble. And now I kind of think Confey are a little bit stronger. But at the same time, I think a relegation dogfight might just suit Alan Wood that little bit better. And as we kind of mentioned a couple of times through the year, they do have scoring forwards in Owen Bagnall and Joey Cunningham and a couple more as well. So it's going to be tight. They always are tight. They're real tense affairs, these relegation finals. And yeah, who's got the stomach for the battle is going to be the winner of the match.
Yeah. Quick one, Tommy. Your victor in that one?
Yeah, I mean, as Ger said, they're the absolute dog fights every single year. Confey are obviously unlucky to be in this. Again, I tipped Alan Wood the last day to beat Kilcock because of the forwards that they have. Confey don't exactly lack them either with Niall Carney, Josh Collins. These lads are putting up scores every week that are vital. David Slattery showing great form this year. Like, we all remember him and his darting runs for Kildare and the jobs that he used to do. Like, he's genuinely has been very impressive. I was very worried for him in that Johnstown Bridge game. I thought he picked up a bad injury on the sideline. And I just, in my head, I was just thinking, oh God, isn't that typical, like a player that's shown some great form. But he shook it off, in fairness. That's probably down to his conditioning as well. But I just think those Alan Wood forwards, and Alan Wood, not the forwards that the obvious ones that they have, but then players like Cormac Denneher and that this year playing so well. At times, I just think that Alan Wood probably haven't kicked on as much as we thought, but that we still know it's in them. Obviously, there's a rumor going around there might be a player coming home as well, which will definitely boost them if that is more than a rumor. Of course, we know about rumors, but I think like so Owen Bagnall, Joey Cunningham, I talk about them every week. When it comes down to it, maybe an inspirational speech from Johnny Doyle might get them up, but it'll be really close. Not one for people looking at except for the faint of heart, people looking for exciting games. I'm going to go with Alan Wood.
Okay.
Just like I gave them the kiss of death in the last group game as well.
Richard, give me some solace.
I'm going to go with Confey.
Good man, Richard.
Although ask me again in half an hour's time, and I'll probably go with Alan Wood because I'm really wavering on this one. But I think it's kind of ironic. Confi for the last few years, probably haven't had as good a team as maybe they have this year, certainly going forward. And this is probably the closest they've come to relegation for a few years. I think they were in the final 2 or 3 or 4 years ago. But I've just been impressed with them when I've seen them this year in the couple of games I've seen. I think they're really good going forward. They've got a good, strong. Paul Dively is playing out of his skin around the middle. And whilst I acknowledge Alan Wood have those forwards, they haven't been enough to get them any win this year so far. I know Bagnall probably wasn't there the whole time. Cunningham probably was there a bit more, but I'm just going to edge it for Confi. But this could it can go to penalties. Apparently, I think I saw in the rules. I think it's extra time.
Yes, extra time. Yeah, extra time.
I was going to say penalties, but I think
no penalties. No penalties. No penalties. Extra time, but no penalties.
And just to touch on something, sorry, I know it takes up a bit of time, but it is really important to avoid relegation from senior. Just looking at the stats, we touched on it last week. It's Maynooth in 2008 were the last relegated team that came back the following year, and the last 6 to have gone down. And I'm excluding Larry's from that because obviously they're still in this year's intermediate championship. But the last 6 to go down haven't come up yet.
Okay.
So it's a real dogfight, this one, to try and stay up in senior.
So that dogfight is the Joe Manamoto Senior Football Championship relegation playoff in Mangard Pitch 1 on Sunday at 6 o'clock between Alan Wood and Confi. Billy O'Connell is the man in the middle. Extra time applies, but no penalties, lads. No penalties, so we could be going for a couple of weeks.
Make Ger make a call on that. it's one vote. It's one vote each. Don't let him away with. Give him the one word.
It's not my role to challenge the regional editor. Ger, what is it?
I'll stay firmly on the fence. I'm like Tommy. I think Richard, in fairness, has done a better job of making his calls count this year. So I think either team is probably praying that I won't mention them. But yeah, I'd be like Tommy. I'd probably slightly say just a narrow win for Alan Wood. But I've said that a couple of times this year, and they're still on that losing streak. So that'll probably have everybody in Alan Wood putting their head in their hands. Now me kind of slightly favouring them.
Team of the week, Ger. What have we got for the senior?
Lots of green there. A mixture between Johnstone Ridge and Moorfield. These are actually harder to pick when there's less games, obviously, kind of a less choice. So yeah, it's been difficult to fill in some of the positions. We were spoiled for choice there through the group stages, but yeah, obviously only the 2 games to pick from here. So Tom Kinsella of Moorfield got the nod in goal. Cathal Quinn, who Richard mentioned there, did very well. And the man I love to pronounce, of course, Thomas von Engelbrechten of Johnstone Bridge at fullback, and Fionn Gillon of Maynooth at wing or cornerback, although he probably played more of a wing back, but yeah, he had a great game for Maynooth. Aaron McNally from Johnstone Bridge got forward and kicked a couple of points. Kevin Moornahan, I thought, was outstanding for Moorfield, and I think since that game was also become a father there as well. So best wishes to him and his partner there. A very busy weekend there last week for Kevin, so hopefully he's getting plenty of sleep in the build up to the weekend, I'm sure, as well. Keane Bourne then of Eadstown as well completes that half-back line. He got that brilliant 2-pointer. His brother Ryan then is in midfield alongside Kieran Flanagan of Maynooth, and in the half-forward line, Richard spoke about him, Evan O'Brien of Moorfield, Paddy Maguire of Maynooth, and Patrick Toohey of Eadstown, with the full forward line, Adam Tyrrell of Moorfield, and the Johnstown duo then of Dean Kelly and Daniel Flynn.
Yeah, and again, thanks to the sponsors. And don't forget that the quarterfinals, this Joe Manamoto Senior Football Championship quarterfinals, will be streamed live on Clubber TV. There'll be coverage on KFM. Yes, who's that?
Pat, sorry, it's me again. I don't want to drift past this because I don't think we mentioned it enough in just looking back at the weekend's games. But Adam Tyrrell was so impressive again the other night for Moorfield, and this year he really has discovered form that he had a few years ago. He looks in great shape. His head seems to be well screwed on. He's making great runs. His goal, the opening goal of the game last Saturday night, like the way he took it, with 3-4 players in front of me, just banged it past the keeper into net. 3rd or 4th goal this season for him. He's a real tool for them this year because it takes a lot of pressure off the likes of Evan O'Brien, likes young Murray, and for him to be the key again. Who's going to pick him up at the weekend, because he's such a tool again for them this year. I can't wait to see how he gets on. I've been so excited to see him play this year because of just the quality that he's shown. So I just wanted to throw that in, because if Maynooth had a forward like him that was positive and actually wanted to take on a bloody shot, they could have been into the quarterfinal.
There you go. Good man, Tommy. Eagle-eyed as always, and I was about to conclude there by saying that there will be full reports on all those Joe Malamotor Senior Football Championship quarterfinals in the Kildare Nationalist next week, led by Ger McNally. Let's move along then to the National Electrical Wholesalers Intermediate Football Championship at quarterfinals last weekend. A win for Suncroft and a win for 2 Mile House. Were they expected, Ger?
Yeah, probably not in the manner of them, I think. I didn't see the 2 Mile House and Round Towers game, but by all accounts, that was pretty poor and kind of pretty poor fare, particularly from Round Towers, and only a couple of late scores made that appear as close as it was. The Suncroft and Ellistown game, I don't think it's any surprise that Suncroft won that, but probably by the margin that they finished winning it up is a bit of a surprise. It was a game played in a gale force wind in Cedral St. Conleth's Park, and Suncroft had it behind them in the first half, but they led by 7 points at the break, and that probably didn't feel like a big lead. It was kind of, I was thinking maybe at the start of the game, 8, 9 points, even 10 points at halftime would probably be needed for Suncroft turning around with it, and they had missed a number of goal opportunities as well. The game had a flying start. Ellistown actually scored a goal with the first score of the match against the wind. Suncroft answered back with a goal a minute later. They hit the crossbar then a minute later, and twice midfielder Tom Martin was through on goal, only to be denied by Oran Donnelly, and all that kind of at half-time led me to think that it was very much there for Ellistown turning around. I was sitting beside Seamus Dillon in the press box in Cedral St. Conleth's Park, and he was kicking every ball. He was very anxious now when things were going into the second half. But in fairness, by about 10 minutes into the second half, it was fairly obvious that Suncroft were going to win it, and Ellistown, they weren't able to kind of find any rhythm in their attacking play. They only scored 3 points in the second half with that strong wind. They had a good goal-scoring opportunity, I think around 37 or 38 minutes. Possibly had a good shout for a foot block, and it was Seamus's nephew, Harry, who made the block with his leg. But it was a big appeal from the Ellistown team. Was that a foot block? And it's always a hard one for a referee. Like, is it close enough to be a foot block or not, and award a penalty? But that decision went against Ellistown, and they kind of faded out of the game after that. You couldn't mention the game without talking about Fium Dowling. He scored 10 points, absolutely superb, ably assisted by Owen Lawless, and also county hurler Con Kyo driving forth in midfield. He had a huge impact on the game, and it was his goal in the 54th minute that kind of sealed the win. But yeah, good win for Suncroft. Really impressive win, especially the second half against that wind. It was very impressive the way they saw it out.
And Tommy, 2 Mile House continued to improve from the preliminary round. Towers, maybe we're stuck in a bit of a rut.
Yeah, it was. It wasn't great stuff now to watch at all. I think that scoreline for Towers there obviously includes those late points. They'll be devastated. They'll be so disappointed, but they haven't really shown anything this year. I mean, they obviously lost heavily to 10 points to Fallons in the last group game. Lost to Ballyteague in the opening group game, and then they beat Castledermot on a kind of a wet. Again, I think I said it was a manky kind of a day over in Kilcullen, but there was just they were missing something, and I don't know what it was. I was watching it the other day, and I was waiting for Jay O'Brien to come into it, but he was really well marshalled by PJ Cashman. But then you're thinking, okay, if Jay is, it's not fair for all the focus to be on him. Who else is there? Who's picking up? Who's going to step forward? Are they relying on Ben Ryan to be running from the middle? Young Scanlon coming in, Max Cosgrove starting on the bench coming in. Who's going to pick it up? And in fairness to Jamie Flynn was the one that tried to get it and tried to drive them forward, but it just wasn't coming off. They were losing the ball in tackles, losing 50-50 ball, playing poor pass out of the back. Again, it goes to show you when you bring an intensity to a game like 2 Mile House brought, and that's an intensity at the back, but also breaking hard up the field. You see Keneally there picking up the ball in his own half and driving up the field. He's
been a revelation for them really since he came back.
He really has. I mean, obviously he's shown a great level of fitness because he was playing football in Canada. But then when he moving the ball quickly, it likes to Tony O'Connor around the middle, and even Chris Healy pulling it out from the full forward line out to act like that kind of quarterback role, which we've seen play in the past. 2 Mile House were good value for their win, absolutely, and they have improved. I think it was in the paper about how much they were improving even before that game.
Yeah, in the paper. The quarterfinals then are Sallins versus Suncroft on Sunday in Mangard Park at 2:45. Rathangan versus 2 Mile House Sunday in Mangard Park at 4:15. Leixlip versus Milltown on Friday night in Mangard Park at 7:45. And Larry's versus Castledermot on Friday night in Cedars in Conless Park at 8 p.m. Richard, Leixlip versus Milltown, is that the tie of the quarterfinal?
Either that, yeah, I think that in terms of who's going to win out, I think that's the one that holds most of the intrigue. I think the Larry's Castledermot game is one that attracts my eye as well in terms of a local derby with plenty riding on it as well. I think it'll be a really close game. But yeah, Leixlip and Milltown, I mean, we're all looking to see, can someone step up to kind of the level that Sallins have been at so far, and it's hard to tell with Leixlip because they've been in a group where they were quite comfortable after losing that ding-dong battle with Rathangan in the preliminary round. But Leixlip have been scoring well. Jack Barrett and Lawler, we've mentioned last week. They've got Ron Fitzsimons playing well. I think he scored 5 points in their last game as well. They've got Darren McDermott back there. So they've got some stalwarts as well, but it's hard to judge them at the moment. Milltown, on the other hand, have had some, difficult enough games so far. We're in the winners group, so probably been playing at a slightly higher level than Leixlip have. It's going to be an absolute 50-50, I think, this one. I'd slightly edge it with Milltown just in terms of what we've seen from them and who they've been playing against. And what we saw last year as well from them. I think they've grown even from that. They've got some excellent young forwards in Donoghue, Paddy Donoghue and Ben Curran in particular, plus some older heads as well, like Alan Dignam there. They have lost Joe Dunn. I think he's still suspended as far as I know for this one. I haven't heard that.
Yeah, I think it was the last game he was sent off. Yeah,
I think he's a big miss for them, particularly when you look at the strength that Leixlip have around the middle. So that for me makes it more of a 50-50, but if you're going to ask for predictions on these as well, it'll be a red and green one for this particular one, but only just.
Speaking of red and green, Sallins versus Suncroft, Ger, another exciting game and prospect there, but you would expect Sallins to be the favourites.
Yeah, look, it's Suncroft obviously had a fantastic win there last week. As I said, they did really well to overcome Ellistown, but yes, Sallins would be, you would imagine, absolutely streets ahead of them. It would take a huge upset, probably the like that we haven't seen in a number of years in a knockout game. For Suncroft to defeat Sallins, and again, I don't mean to be disrespectful to anybody in Suncroft. I'm sure even the likes of Seamus Dillon or somebody like that would probably agree that they're massive underdogs in this game, and Sallins, if they're anywhere near the best, will have far too much for Suncroft there. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but Suncroft are best when they are underdogs, aren't they? Really?
And again, I'm not being disrespectful to them. Definitely, if they're at their best, they'd have an opportunity to threaten Sallins. But look, Sallins have just been absolutely a different class from better sides than Suncroft in this championship so far this year. We've spoken at length about the two Daltons there. They've been so good. Darragh Mangan in midfield. King Grimes, I think, is back after suspension. Has he got one more game? I think he's possibly actually missing for this one. King Grimes, he just lost. He got 2 games after that. Ballyteague sending off. But yeah, look, Sallins, again, everything kind of this year points towards Sallins. They did so well in the league in Division 1, competing with the very best teams in the county. They've hit the ground running in the intermediate championship. They've looked peerless so far, and yeah, I think it's going to take somebody better than Suncroft to stop them, I think.
And does it's similar reply then, Tommy, for Rathangan versus 2 Mile House? Rathangan favourites there, I expect.
They'd have to be. In fairness, Rathangan are up there as possibly second favourites. I haven't taken a look at the betting, but they have been impressive all year. So you would imagine they'd have too much for 2 Mile House. 2 Mile House have that knack though of understanding teams. They're obviously there's a lot of homework goes on in a lot of these matches, and 2 Mile House will most certainly, obviously with the help of VO and Clubber and all these, they'll be able to have a look back at a lot of games and get their matchups right. Rathangan, they have to be on it. They're not coming into it like they were last year, slightly under the radar, catching round towers on the hop, scoring 4 goals against them, then going in and unfortunate to lose against Cara in the semi-final. There's a lot of focus on Rathangan this year. I didn't help the situation when I had them as my favourite as the bolter this year to come out of the championship, but I'll stand by that because they are a very impressive outfit. So I think they should come through against 2 Mile House.
And finally, then Richard, the St. Lawrence versus Castledermot. You mentioned that has been apart from anything else, it's a derby game, so it's a quarter-final as well.
It is, and it's hard to know what to make of Larry's or Castledermot, for that matter. When you look at their form, Larry's have lost, those couple of games against Ellistown and then Kilcullen, and that kind of leads you to think, they're not quite there in terms of a rebuild. And I've spoken before about the difficulty of coming back out from intermediate after you've been relegated. I think Larry's are going to need a year or two to get those young players coming through and at a level where they can compete for the title. So I don't see them in the top 4 as such, but neither would I see Castledermot.
It's a very young Castledermot team.
I think Castledermot have surprised me in a way with that win over Ballyteague in terms of the manner of it, and how well they played and what they scored. Because up to that they hadn't really shown that. But they've got plenty about them at the same time. Emmett O'Keefe's doing well at centre back. They've got Dan Gray up front. They've got Aaron Murphy back now as well. I don't think he started the championship, or certainly didn't perhaps play in the league. They've always got Gavin Keating scoring up front. I think David Keating missed the last one through injury. I don't know if he's likely to be back.
I think David is still injured. I could be wrong, but I think he still is. But if you look at that, as you talk with David Keating, pound for pound, he's been Castledermot's best player for about 8 or 9 years now.
Yeah.
When I say pound for pound, you mean his overall game. He probably is their best player. Yeah. And he's a huge loss for Castledermot.
Yeah.
Okay, Tommy, stick with you.
Are we tipping at this stage, Pat? Or
I'm just going to go start with. Well, I'll start with you then. So your 4 semi-finalists then.
That's me, Pat.
Yeah.
Sallins, Rathangan, Middletown, and Castledermot. Okay,
Tommy, take your hands away from the head.
Sallins, Rathangan, Leixlip, and Castledermot.
Okay, sounds very familiar. And finally, Ger.
Yeah, Sallins, Rathangan. I edge towards Leixlip just with the experience that they have there. I think there might be just, especially if Joe Dunn is missing, I think there's an appeal in there this week, so that could have a big bearing on the outcome. But at the moment, I just edge towards Leixlip, and I'll have to go with St. Lawrence's then as well. I know Castledermot would be licking their lips at an opportunity now against St. Lawrence's, but yeah, St. Lawrence's, we've mentioned, I think, a few different times over the year about different teams that they have to have a bit of a kick in them. I'd expect Lawrence's to go firing at this one, and yeah, I think St. Lawrence will win that.
Okay,
Pat, do you notice that Richard is smiling there? And the reason Richard is smiling is because he knows now, between the senior predictions and the intermediate predictions, he has a couple of ones that he's gone for on his own. And he knows that this will be clipped. And he'll be like, Tommy, make sure and clip that so we can put it up. So to show everybody I was right.
Okay. I think I was given too much credit earlier on. I think we're about level, Tommy and myself.
Richard, here you go. I'm going to put it to you then. The National Electrical Wholesalers Intermediate Football Championship relegation playoff between Monasterevin and St. Kevin's at 5:00 on Saturday. Your prediction there.
Tommy shot me down a couple of weeks ago, and I said they're due a win, and that was in relation to St. Kevin's. They're obviously still due a win, otherwise they wouldn't be in a relegation playoff. But imagine St. Kevin's and Monasterevin being in a relegation playoff from intermediate. I don't think anyone would have foreseen that. Certainly a couple of years ago, Kevin's were in the quarterfinals last year. Haven't seen much of both teams, to be honest, this year. I'm just tracking their results more than anything. I think I've seen one Monasterevin game, maybe half of a St. Kevin's game, so I wouldn't be the best person to give too much insight into this one. But just looking at form, and Kevin's had some pretty tight games against some reasonable opposition that they were up against. There's talk maybe of an injury there that might be a big one from their perspective as well, though. Monasterevin, they've gradually gotten players back. Maybe those players needed a bit of time to settle back in and start firing. There's no doubt there'll be a huge effort from them this time. I just think on form, from what I've seen of the form and the little I've seen of them play, I think Kevin still have it in them to win that one.
Tommy, you agree with that?
I didn't at the start when Richard started talking, but I was just running it over in my head. And what we mentioned earlier in the hurling, a few of those Kyle Dove players, look at the attitude they showed last weekend in the hurling. To drag that game over the line. They're big players for Kyle Dove and are for St. Kevin's as well.
Yeah.
So at the start, I was thinking about the possibility of St. Kevin's having a fairly significant player missing through injury. But then I was going through Monastrevin in my head, and I was thinking, do they have enough to kick on? I think it'll be a really tight game, but I'm actually going to agree with Richard on this one.
And Ger?
Yeah, it's very hard to call. I would be edging towards St. Kevin's again. This sort of dogfight maybe kind of suits them. They're probably a little bit like Confi in that they're a little bit unlucky to have ended up in here, and they've lost 4 games, but have been competitive in all of them. That they haven't kind of been blown out of the water in any game, and they haven't looked at a dreadfully poor side that you maybe tip for relegation in any of their games, and yet they find themselves in this playoff. But then you worry about their scorers again. Like they scored 4-5 last week. 4 goals. If they can get that, that'll be great. But 5 points is a poor return, and still probably reliant on Barry Noon for a lot of the scores. And he's been a great warrior for them down through the years. They do have that battling spirit though, and I think that might be enough against the Monastrevin side, who have. Yeah, they've been struggling all year. Monastrevin has been a really difficult year for them, and it's a pity to see because they were a club that, as a neutral, I had a great time watching them when they won Leicester Intermediate, and they won Kildare Intermediate since then. Have been up as senior very, very recently as well. So it will be real shame to see them down at junior level, but they've been in a downward spiral all year, and it's hard to get out of. So yeah, although I slightly would worry about how Kevin's are going to manage to get the scores to win it, I'd edge towards them.
So the National Electrical Wholesalers Intermediate Football Championship quarterfinals are Salons versus Suncroft on Sunday in Mangard Park at 3:15. Rathangan versus 2 Mile House on Sunday in Mangard Park at 4:15. Leixlip versus Maynooth on Friday night in Mangard Park at 7:45. And St. Lawrence's versus Castledermot on Friday night in St. Conleth's Park at 8 o'clock. And the relegation playoff is between St. Kevin's and Monastrevin, and that's on Saturday in Mangard Park at 5 o'clock. The team of the week then at intermediate level, Ger, is...
Yeah. Okay, Oren Donnelly, who I mentioned for Elliston, made a couple of great saves against Suncroft. He gets the nod between the posts. Jack Setright had an excellent game for Suncroft. The old warhorse from 2 Mile House, Peter Kelly, and Mikey Joyce as well. Again, another kind of real stalwart of the team for Down Towers and cornerback. 2 Mile House men then in the halfbacks with Andrew Craig and PJ Cashman. And Harry Dillon of Suncroft then as well completes the halfback line. Contio was superb for Suncroft. He's in midfield then alongside Tony O'Connor of 2 Mile House into the full forward line. Then Jamie Flynn of Round Towers, Didier Cordonnier, who was showing great scoring form, the county goalkeeper, playing outfield for 2 Mile House, a little bit like Paddy McKenna there on the hurling side of things as well. But 6 points I think he scored in that game against Towers. So he takes his place as centre forward, and Owen Lawless of Suncroft then in the half forward line completes that. Further forward then Jack Collins of 2 Mile House, Fionn Dowling of Suncroft, and Tyg Watson of Ellistown.
Yeah, very, very exciting team, you might say. We see them, we might put them out against the senior team at the end of the year at some stage. Anyway, moving on then to the Tom Cross Transport Junior Football Championship. Tommy, you were at Garvin Castle Mitchell game. Jerry, you were at it as well. Drama upon drama upon drama.
Yeah, absolutely. What a great advertisement again for Kildare Junior Football, and club have taken notice of it, and rightfully so, because there's been some cracking games, and yeah, this was another one. Castle Mitchell, over the kind of the full 80 minutes of it, I think Castle Mitchell were just slightly the better side. They can see the 2 horrendous goals, one in normal time, and then especially the one in extra time, where they were just getting on top of that stage. And at Garvin, I think it had gone 5 or 6 minutes without a score. they were starting to look like they just were running out of ideas a little bit. Derek Tradick had been superb for them right throughout the game, but was probably tiring at that stage, and they just got such a fluky goal. I actually thought even the free kick was a little bit unlucky, because I think referee Jack O'Connell overall had a fine game, and again, it's not by any means a glaring error. It's one that even with a video you'd still have an argument over, but it was one that again maybe another time would be seen as a shoulder to shoulder. But once the free was given, it would look like a tap over free for that Garvan, and they take their point and try and get an equalising score. But for it to loop in over the head of their goalkeeper was just so unfortunate. But Castlemaine showed great heart that they engineered that last chance. James Harris played short free, got it back and held his nerve to kick an equalising score. And then it was into kind of the lottery of penalties. I say lottery, I don't actually agree that it's a lottery. It's still a skill that's necessary. But the one thing I would say with the GAA rules, I think it's very unfair to only nominate 5 players and to go back around. I don't see the reasoning for that. I mean, after 5 penalties each, I don't see why there's not goes down to the 6, 7, 8 penalty taker. I think to ask players to take a second one is very harsh. And obviously we ended up with a situation where one Castle Mitchell player missed 2 penalties, and very, very unlucky for him, because he's been one of the outstanding players for Castle Mitchell this year, Ray Kavanagh, and for him to unfortunately bear that brunt is really tough, and that's the only thing I would say about those rules. I think penalty shootouts are a necessary evil. They're there, they have to be decided, but I would like to see that kind of after 5 penalties to go down to a 6, 7, 8, or how many penalty takers are needed to sort it out.
And Tommy, I know there were 3 penalties missed, but the quality of the penalties that were scored were absolutely outstanding. In Premier League they would be raving about them.
Oh yeah, they were. Well, from what I could see,
and further out to 14 yards out.
Yeah, exactly. From what I could see from the icicles that had formed over my eyeballs, I was never as cold and wet in my life. I was the only person in the side terrace in Conlitz Park as well, so I had nobody even to give out about it to. The quality of penalties were brilliant. They were it's one of those things. Thinking back to the likes of Man United in the Europa League final a few years ago, and there's 14 penalties not missed, and it just kept going and going. But that was down to the quality. And in fairness, the keepers were getting close to a lot of these. But if you look at James Harris stuck 2 in the top corner, they were high quality, and it was very unfortunate on Gavin as well, because somebody has to, and you knew, and the more it went, you could feel the tension. You just know. Somebody's going to have to miss, or the keeper's going to have to save it, and it just has to, and you just feel sorry for these players. I agree with Ger that Castle Mitchell overall were probably slightly the better team, and at Garvan got so pox lucky with that free kick that was under hit that ended up going in, because I think Castle Mitchell possibly would have held on if that came back to it. So. But for Castle Mitchell to get that equalising point with the last kick of the game as well was super from them, to claw themselves back in there, because both teams looked like they were gone at different stages. It was brilliant. I'm going to get that penalty shootout. I'm going to get the highlights from it. I'm going to be sticking it up somewhere in the next couple of days, just so people can have a look at it, because it was great drama.
Yeah, and Richard, coming up to half-time, in fact, into injury time on the Saturday game, then Ballymore were leading 9 points to 5, full value for that. But that goal just before half-time for Kappa, I think that turned out to be crucial, even though Ballymore did get their own goal 30 seconds into the second half. But I think that goal for Kappa just before half-time, that might have been the turning point in the game.
It was for me. I thought... coming up to that, I thought we did talk a little bit last week, maybe, I think it was, about whether Group B was as strong as Group A, and we might find that out in the quarterfinal stage. I think we kind of did, in that obviously both Group B teams did get through. I thought Kappa were struggling in that first half, and I could really only see Ballymore coming through it. Now, I was watching on Clubber. I don't know what the conditions were like locally.
They were great. They were very good. There was a wind. Certainly, there was a wind, but the conditions were very good. Yeah, but there was definitely a wind in the second half.
Yeah, and then once the goal went in, it was a well worked goal for sure, and they badly needed it. But once Ballymore got that goal, was it Halpin? I think straight after the interval as well. Halpin, I thought they're going to kick on, but I think they'll regret some of their shooting.
Yeah, 14 wides.
They hit a lot of wides. But Kappa, fair play. So I mean, Kappa they've been in competitive games all through, and I think that maybe was a factor, and I think that may continue to be a factor even in the semi-finals. Where you're going to have at Garvin, who are well primed against Grange, who maybe haven't had such competitive games, and then obviously Rathcoffey and Kappa are both in Group B, so that should even out. But fair play to Kappa, but they've a good range of strong players. Moriarty's, Jack Mulligan. The guy's name is escaping me now. Toby McMorland, is it?
McMorland, yeah.
They've got Glenn Carter at the back. Ollie Lewis is a real unheralded workhorse around the middle as well. So there's a lot of really good players in that Kappa team. Dean Brennan up front, is always worth 2 or 3 points. I think he got the goal as well in the first half there on Saturday. So
how
I
do
think
you
they
see
were
them?
worth the win in the end. I wouldn't say Ballymore necessarily kicked it away. I think Kappa were worthy of the win.
How do you see Kappa getting on against Rathcoffey then? That semi-final is on Saturday in Mangard Park at 2, and then Mangard Park at 3:30 is the other semi-final, Grange Northern versus that Garvin. First of all, Rathcoffey versus Kappa, Richard.
It's a really hard one to call. I actually did the first game between these teams in the group where Kappa came out on top by, I think it was about 5 points.
Plus 5, yeah.
I think that was Rathcoffey's only defeat. Looking at the table, that must have been Rathcoffey's only defeat there, Tommy. I think
100%
over the course of Group B, and Kappa were well worthy of it in that game in Clane. I think they were behind by 4 or 5 points against the wind in the first half, but they managed the game out. They scored a couple of good goals. A lot of those players I've mentioned there earlier were to the fore in that particular win. So they've got it in them certainly to beat Rathcoffey. I don't know whether the extra game will hinder them or help them. I tend to think at this stage legs might be a little bit tired and it might hinder them, and Rathcoffey having the extra week off may stand to them. So, I'm going to slightly favour Rathcoffey in this one.
Grange and that's Garvin, Ger.
Yeah, I suppose we've talked up Group B there now. Yeah, so are we overestimating the strength of Grange looking at those sides in Group A? We'll get an answer here, but my stat for the week is that Grange have lost more semi-finals over the last 4 years than they have group games. They've lost the semi-final stage in the last 3 years and only lost 2 group games during that period. And they came into a semi-final last year against Kill on the back of a 100% record in the group stages, and then lost to a Kill side who had only won 2 of their 5 matches in the group. So certainly it's not a foregone conclusion by any means, but at the same time, look, Grange, they have been impressive. They can only beat what's in front of them, and in terms of their games, they have been very, very impressive indeed. The 4 Bergen brothers, we've spoken a lot about them. They have other good players around them, Brian Cullen as well from wing back as well, and Dylan Costigan is very strong at the centre back. Keith McGloin in midfield is another big powerhouse there as well. So they have a lot of very good players. Timmy Doyle as well, he's still going strong. He comes off the bench there and causes a bit of chaos there in the final quarter as well. He's quite the character and quite the player down through the years, and I think he's heavily involved with Clonmullion there. I think he might even be managing Clonmullion soccer team this year, and so he's a very busy man at this time of the year as well. But he has an impact then as well, and a bit of a closer there in the final stages if Grange needs to be brought to life as well. So look, that's a long way around of saying I can't see anything other than the Grange win. But at Garvin, they'll be on a high, but they would have put in a huge effort then as well, obviously going into extra time as well. So that'll be interesting to see if that's taking anything out of the legs, if they've had sore bodies, and they're probably very reliant still on Derek Craddock, who was one of their older players and maybe doesn't have the mobility that he did a couple of years ago, but he's such an intelligent footballer. And then they have the likes of Alan Sork, who adds the pace as well. So Jordan Nolan Mullally is another one who had a terrible game against Castle Mitchell. It's hard to believe that he could be that bad again, and I don't think he will be. So he's someone that Grange will have to look after, because on form he's a very good forward, and he's been at Garvin's best forward over the last 2 years. But just had an off day against Castle Mitchell, so maybe he'll have an on day against Grange. But I still don't see that being enough. I think Grange will win that one.
2 words from you, Tommy. The finalists of the Tom Cross Junior Transport, Tom Cross Transport Junior Football Championship final this year. 2 words.
The 1 and 2 that I've given all year: Grange and Rathcoffey.
Grange and Rathcoffey, okay. And the Junior A semi-final, Robertstown versus Kildangan on Thursday in Mangard Park at 7:45, and Ballykelly versus Kill on Thursday in Mancar pitch 1. The other one's a pitch 2 at 8 o'clock. Ger, the team of the week for the juniors this week, then?
Yeah, the loading and lifted Kildare Nationalist Junior Football Team of the Week. So we have Sean Dowling of Ballymore in goal, 2 Castle Mitchell cornerbacks, then Brian Byrne on one side and Lusheen Boylan on the other, with Dara Devine of Kappa then manning the edge of the square on this team. James Harris has to move to wing back to accommodate the absolute regular at number 6 on this team through this championship. Kappa's Glenn Carter. He almost has that name enshrined. That's one thing Tommy doesn't have to change every week. And his graphics is Glenn Carter's name at number 6 on this team. Cathal Doyle then on Kappa also completes that half-back line. Into midfield then, Derek Craddock as well of Ackgarvan, who we mentioned. He had a fabulous game there against Castle Mitchell, and he's joined in midfield with Shane Barrett of Ballymore. Ray Kavanagh of Castle Mitchell, and that is not a sympathy vote after him missing those couple of penalties. That's based on his performance right throughout the game when he was one of the key men in that forward line for Castle Mitchell, and it's just so unfortunate the way that game ended up for Ray, because he was excellent throughout not only this game but right throughout the season for Castle Mitchell. Jack Mulligan then of Kappa and Owen Dunn of Ackgarvan complete the half forward line, and 2 more Ackgarvan men then in the full forward line. Cian Doyle, who got that winning penalty, and Owen Moyers, and they're joined by Dean Brennan of Kappa.
And as we said before, just like the senior championship and the intermediate championship, the junior championship will be shown live on Clubber TV. There'll also be coverage on the KFM, and there'll be full coverage with photographs and reports in the Kildare Nationalist next week.
Pat, quick one. Just because he probably doesn't get, we talk about these team of the weeks every week, and we talk them through and how they're picked. But a shout out to Seamus Dillon, because Seamus has an input to these every week, and whatever game he's at, he always gives us the players that he feels across the championships, across the 3 of them, the players that he wants in them and the reasoning behind it. So a shout out to Seamus.
So you can blame him if you're not happy with the selection.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, the only thing is we don't ever nominate who are the selectors. You see, so it could be more than Seamus. You know, we haven't identified who the selectors are.
Seamus is one of them, and we've always said how the 4 of us pick the team.
Right.
We talk about the 4 of us all the time,
That's
so
all
we may as well get Seamus get the blame as well.
Okay, I'll throw that in there.
And that's like meetings there. We're like the traders there that have to meet in the cloaks there around the fires, around the fireside every Tuesday morning to pick these teams. Identities remain unidentified yet.
Yeah. Well, I'll throw it in now. Is that all right, Tommy? I'll throw it in now, will I?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So that's our junior championship team of the week, and of course, thanks also to our good colleague Seamus Dillon, who helps us as always with all those teams of the week. You know, Trojan work indeed. All right, let's move along to the ladies' football, and the Kildare LGFA championships are ongoing. They've reached their semi-final stage, and unfortunately, because of our earlier recording of the podcast this week, we can't do an in-depth, I suppose, preview of those particular matches. But the Joe Malin Motors Kildare LGFA Senior Championship semi-finals on Tuesday night. St. Lawrence's versus Sarsfields, that's at 8:30 p.m. and Kilcullen versus Eadstown, that's 8:15. The relegation semi-final, Confey versus Maynooth at 6:45, and that's in Maynooth, and Kill versus Suncroft in Kill at 8:15. Let's have a look at the other fixtures then. In the Joe Malin Motors Intermediate Championship, it's semi-final Ballina versus Carbery, Nairse versus Kappa. Relegation semi-final Raheens versus Kilcock, Leaksall versus Clane. And we just look at the Junior A, the Nace Racecourse Kildare LGFA Junior A Football Championship semi-finals, Selbridge versus Salons, Nafina versus Athy, and the relegation semi-finals, Rathangan versus Kildangan Nerney, and Milltown versus Moorfield. Ger, you're popping along to see the St. Lawrence's Sarsfields game. I'm looking after the Kilcullen Eadstown game. Larry's and Sarsfields, both teams have been there or thereabouts in the last number of years. Larry's were in the final last year.
Yeah, like yourself, Pat, I'm probably checking the weather forecast and hoping that the rain stays away, given we're at 2 rounds. I probably don't have great cover if the rain does fall, but we'll be there nonetheless, no matter what, hail, rain or shine. And yeah, look, there are 2 good games. I think, like the men's championship, they're probably the 4 teams that you would expect for the semi-final. Probably before the championship, there were 4 sides that you would expect to be battling it out here. So yeah, look, I haven't seen either of these 2 teams earlier on, so I'm only kind of going on, the counter pairs that we know, and St. Lawrence's will be strong there from that point of view with the 3 wheelers, and Mia Ryan had a fantastic debut season at senior level for Kildare as well. Obviously, Sarsfields appear to be going very well at the moment. That young girl there in the picture, Aisling Uru, is it Uru? Her brother plays soccer in the League of Ireland for Longford Town, so they're a good sporting family, and she's been a really impressive minor at county level. I would have seen her over the last couple of years. So yeah, she's there, obviously joining in with the likes of Roisin Byrne in the attack as well. And I'm sure there's two Price girls, are they still there? Molly and Ciara as well, and Shauna Kendrick, I think, as well. So look, I'm looking forward to seeing what sort of lineups are there. There'll be two close games, I think, either way, and I wouldn't know enough to venture a prediction for these games, but just looking to get them. And it's the latest championship over the last couple of years has thrown up. Obviously, Easttown are very strong, and they've kind of dominated, but they're, in general, the kind of matches between these sides particularly are pretty close, and I think that'll bear out again here tonight in these two semi-finals.
Yeah, and Tommy, Easttown obviously will be favourites going for, I think it's a 7 in a row now at this stage, but Kilcullen are a coming team, and certainly at home they will have a big support as well.
Yeah, I mentioned it last week. How well both of the things that you said, but particularly how Kilcullen have come up in the last couple of years, and those young players they have, whether we're a year too early for them or a couple of years, because they are very young. But as you said, they're at home. It's tonight. It's Tuesday night. The weather is supposed to be, surprisingly enough, manky again over in Kilcullen, which I've used before. Whenever you're in those wide open spaces of their beautiful new grounds, but that should be extremely interesting, because Easttown definitely laid down a marker the last day against a decent Kill team, just to show that they're absolutely there and aren't going anywhere. But will be interesting to see what comes out tonight. Kilcullen would need to find a bit more scoring boots. I think they struggled to put up too much against Suncroft the last day. They let Suncroft hang in there for a long time. I think Kilcullen scored 1-8. It was about 1-8-7, I think. So they'll need to find their scoring boots against the scoring powerhouse that it is Easttown.
Yeah, so there will be reports on those games online on the Kildare Nationalist on Wednesday. Lads, I threw it out there. Maybe we might have 2 or 3 minutes of a quick discussion, and we'll do it again. The fact that somebody suggested that there could be a split season between hurling and football in Kildare. Richard, I know you have kind of touched on that in some quarters in the past.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know what the players think, because I think we touched on it there as to how many dual players, and maybe it's a little bit of a surprise how many there are, but there are certainly some clubs where it is a big factor. I think there are things you can do within the existing structure. I think I'd suggested it before. If you just started the hurling a week or two later than the football, and you finished it a week or two earlier, you could have a nice structure where it's hurling 1 week, football the next week. You don't need to have all these midweek hurling games. You don't have to have the footballers playing 3 weeks in a row. You don't need a month's gap in the hurling championship. So I think there's a lot you can do without actually a split season as such. And my concern, I don't know how it works. Maybe Ger is closer to this from the Carlow experience. But I mean, to me, do you really want players playing maybe up until, I don't know what it is, maybe mid-August or thereabouts, and then have no games after that for those players that aren't dual players? Be it the hurling starts and then you have the football. I'm not a big fan of that whole structure. I think it would be better to have players having an even spread of games all through this club season, and maybe having football 1 week and hurling the next. That to me seems the more optimal solution.
But just before Ger comes in there, I know they do it in Wexford. I think they bring hurling first and then football second. And there's a bit of an outcry down there that the hurlers are so long then without a game that comes into the championship. They're a bit, I suppose, off the pace of it. What's the story in Carlow, Ger?
Yeah, well, they've the 3 years that I've kind of been working down there, like that's been there the whole time. The hurling first, they run it off. They've obviously already had their county final there a few weeks ago on the hurling.
Good game.
Now, yeah, absolutely, yeah. And then the Mount Vincent Rangers will play the winners of the Kildare Championship in Leinster. So they have a long wait for that, and that's obviously the down thing about that. And of course then as well, the Carlow Senior Football Championship, they only have 8 senior teams, so there's less games. There's a lot more games in the Kildare Championship that if it was even football first, there's a lot of waiting around. And looking at those quarterfinals from the footballers, I was just trying to quickly run through my head, but I think as a Johnstone Bridge claim probably have a couple, maybe, there's not a huge amount of dual players. Obviously there are in other clubs, but just looking at those quarterfinalists, the top 8 teams in this year's championship, I don't think there's a huge amount of dual players outside of maybe Johnstone Bridge, as I said, and probably Clane, Nace. I don't think bar Brian Byrne James Burke obviously is injured this year. So yeah, there's only a handful in those kind of top 8 teams. So I don't see a split season kind of working well in Kildare. But as Rich was saying, there's definitely room for improvement on the way the championship is structured. The championship as a whole, the structures, I think we're going to probably have a proper chat about that maybe at the end of the season. And the structures themselves, it definitely, I think, is in need of a revamp. But the one thing then as well, Noel McKenna, I suppose he's in as the chairman of the CCC. This is his first year. He would have learned a huge amount this year about the fixtures and everything that goes along with it, and things behind the scenes that people would, that a lot of people would have no idea about in terms of fixture requests and dealing with referees, and the knock-on effect of moving one game or changing one referee can have another effects across, fixtures across the weekend. So I think Noel McKenna will have learned a lot this year, and will take those learnings and experience into next year. But yeah, there's definitely room for a revamp, but for a split season, I don't see that one working in Kildare.
Tommy, then your brief thoughts on a possible split season?
Yeah, I agree with the lads. I couldn't see a split season working at all. It'd be very unfair on a certain group of players, be it whether it's the footballers or the hurlers or whatever way they're mixing up. More likely, obviously, the hurlers. But the feedback from the players, I think, as Richard said at the start, is very important, because if you get the feedback from the large cohort of hurlers and they want their championship ran off, and they can either have a focus on a break to recover after what is a long season, or would they prefer it broken up to, it does depend on what the players want. The big focus obviously should be on managing a little bit better. I don't think there should be any championship games midweek when replays aren't a thing anymore. I don't think there should be any midweek championship games at all. I think the bigger conversation is the structure of the championships that we're going to have in a few weeks' time.
Yeah, that was one of the questions.
Sorry, Pat, just one thing, just very quick as well. There is a reason that Carlo brought that in, and it was the hurling clubs that brought that in, Carlo, and they, I suppose, like that non-stop hurling, every week, they're, especially for hurlers, I suppose they like to have their touch and their eye in, and definitely there is a benefit there to the hurlers of playing in consecutive weeks and playing kind of a 6-8 week championship and getting that every week. But then there's also, an awful lot on the flip side then as well, like Mount Leinster Rangers, as we said, they have a 3-month break from hurling pretty much, and leading into Leinster, and then obviously just footballers sitting around kicking their heels as well. So yeah, no, as I said, I wouldn't see it working in Kildare, but it is not without its kind of benefits as well.
Yeah, there you go. That was one of the questions that came in from our viewers and listeners. And we have a couple of other questions as well, but we won't get to them this week. One is, are there too many teams in the senior championship? And the other one was, should there be a look at the championship again, which I know they tried last year. Maybe there should be an A and a B championship rather than what we have at the moment. But that's some topic that we will discuss as the weeks progress towards Christmas, and we've a little bit of time before Christmas. A few other things then between now and then. Of course, last Friday night was the first of the Club Kildare club draws, fundraising draw, and I think it was a Ballykelly winner in that particular one. But Richard, that's one of the most successful fundraisers that both the clubs and the counties go through every year. It's a really successful fundraiser.
Yeah, it is. I think it shows what can be done within the county in terms of revenue generation. Certainly seems to garner an awful lot of interest. And fair play to that person from Ballykelly who took home the car. I'm not sure which car it was this week, but fair play to them.
Yeah, and of course the support comes in from Joe Mallon Motors. Tommy, a big day in Kilcullen on Saturday. They're opening, launching, unveiling, or whatever it is, their Field of Dreams all day on Saturday. It's a pity that's up against so many championship games.
Yeah, it is a pity it's clashing with those, but like they've had this date penciled in for a while. It's been a long project, a lot of really good people involved out there. They had an idea, they had a vision of what they wanted the place to look like, the standards that they wanted to raise up. From what we can see now, they had a great aerial video put up during the week where we got a good look at it. Even putting in the new scoreboard last year, the fixing of the stand, the pitches, their wall of contributors, the plaques. It just looks fantastic. It should be a great day on Saturday.
Yeah, indeed. And Ger, obviously heartbreak for the Ireland women's rugby team with Ruth Campbell, the former Ace player, on board. She had an outstanding game once again, but real heartbreak for them.
Yeah, and I was in St. Connell's Park. I was following that. I was following the race and trying to look at the matches that were on in front of us as well. So it was a busy Sunday, but yeah, real tough look for the Irish team there. And we mentioned last week after that game against New Zealand that it was going to be another kind of real uphill battle, but they certainly made a much better fist of it this time around. And I probably not the best person to talk about the kind of in-depth rules of rugby, but to my eye, it looked very harshly done by there in the last line out then when they were pushing for that. Would have been a winning try, wouldn't it? Or an equalising try and possibly a winner from the conversion. So, yeah, to my eye, they seem very hard done by. But, yeah, Ruth Campbell, she's really nailed down a position in the Irish team in the last 12 months or so. And, yeah, she's only kind of getting started in her international career. So, yeah, the best luck to her in the future. And hopefully she'll have better days like that in the World Cup ahead.
But it's strange. The two French players, one 12 weeks for biting and the other 3 games for foul play. That doesn't do much for what happened during the game.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's no use to Ireland now at this stage. Yeah, like it's one of those things that, in one way, is those citing and then punishing players after the game. That when they're not caught not caught at the time it's a very good way of doing things with the rugby. But at the same time, it doesn't do anything good for the team who are beaten and could have benefited from those decisions happening in real time.
And it was a good day also in the Courageous for the Champions Day. Good performances all around from a lot of local horses. Yeah,
Aidan O'Brien had obviously a fantastic weekend, and even when his main kind of favourite horse doesn't win, is kind of a second or even third string, as it was with Monastrevan jockey on board, Ron Whelan getting a win on very precise ride. But great weekend for Johnny Murtagh as well. He had 3 winners across the 2 days of the Irish Champions Festival there, 2 in Leopardstown and rounding things off then with the last race in the Curragh on the Sunday as well. And also a good win for Jessica Harrington as well. She's kind of obviously really kind of changed her model in the last few years. Previously best known as a jumps trainer, but has some really fantastic horses on the flat over the last few years, and has a great partnership there with jockey Shane Foley, who's had a lot of winners over the last few years for Jessica, and another one there with Baron Varna.
That's it. We could be here until Christmas to talk about all the sports, because there's so many people in Kildare involved in sports and a huge amount of volunteers making sure that those sports happen indeed. So congratulations to all of them. That's our little podcast for this particular week. Episode 7 is in the can now. It's in the bag, and we hope you enjoy it. I'm Pat Costello. Thanks as always to Ger McNally, to Richard Commins and to Tommy O'Connell. Good luck to all the teams taking part this weekend, and I hope you all enjoy the games.